Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tradesman Experience. This is the podcast built by tradesmen for tradesmen. My name is Josh, and across the table is, of course, Mr. Nate Newton. Nate, how are you, sir?
I don't know, a little twisted up after a conversation we just had for the last hour.
I was going to say,
You got a lot of shit to think about, you know?
It's like reading meditations.
Yeah, I know. It's none of anybody's goddamn business what we were talking
Hey,
about.
man, it's life.
Yeah.
Yep, it's life.
It is.
We've got some more interviews coming up with the tradie ladies. Been having some conversations, working on scheduling for that. We do have an in-person one coming up, and we got another one, lady in Montana that I'm talking to right now. And as I encourage everyone to do before they come onto the show, listen to a couple of the episodes first. And so that's what I encourage her to do. And so she's going to check out the podcast and get back with me, and we can, kind of get that scheduled. But I feel like the last few weeks have been like a little unorthodox, maybe. The schedule's been
we both
crazy.
Had a lot of shit going on.
A lot of stuff going on.
Lives, yeah,
so a lot of stuff going on. And
business is fucking, dude.
You guys are in a weird state right now.
It's very strange because we've been quote unquote dead. But it's not that we're dead. It's that we're waiting on all this different shit from, and the thing is, like, the thing about contracting is that there's so much shit that's out of your control and you just have to roll with it. It's easy to complain about it, and be like, oh, these motherfuckers won't do this and that. And it's like, unfortunately, the way the cards landed for like these 5 projects that we have, everything's going to show up simultaneously. And it's going to be a fucking madhouse for like 2 months straight. Shit, probably through January it'll be a fucking gong show. And it's like, the weather coming in, that's going to present a whole new set of challenges. And like, we have a lot going on, but we've been on this like 3 or 4 week lull of like trying to push things through to get things going and get stuff started. And we've pushed hard on everything, but now they're all kind of collapsing at the same time. And it's like, fuck.
Yeah.
So, and different changes in our systems and our, a big part about what we're going to talk about tonight has been, that's something we're implementing throughout the shop. And it's like, we're trying to use this lull time to like sharpen the systems, sharpen the people, and get out in front of some stuff to where once all this shit hits, that it's like, we can actually handle it,
I think that's an opportunity a lot of people miss and misunderstand, because regardless of the market, there are peaks and valleys in your individual operations.
Right. And
as I was talking with you and Matt today, literally from one day to the next, a contract got pushed back a month.
We were set to be on site in one day, and they're like, yeah.
Pushing it back 30 days.
And
that's a big adjustment.
Yeah.
For any small business.
Yeah.
So understanding that when there is opportunity, when there's a slow work period, that's the time to evaluate the operations, evaluate the people. Here's what happens when you don't. And as I explain this, I think a lot of people may be able to relate to it. If you're not intentional about that, when people are slow, they start to focus on what everybody else is doing.
Yep. And then they start lowballing their numbers.
And I'm talking internally.
Oh.
Okay. Like if you're looking at your team, the people on your team start looking at what everybody else is doing, and they start to complain. And, well, Nate's not doing this. Well, Matt's not doing this. Well, Josh isn't here when he's supposed to be. And because people have time.
Right.
And they pay attention, unfortunately, to the negative. And they start to kind of cultivate this toxic mindset because they're not busy.
Right.
And they're not focusing on the correct thing. So when you have an opportunity, whether it's a slow day or a slow week or month or whatever, utilize that time to evaluate. What can we do? What have we learned over the last high period that we need to adjust? And what is it that we can change or create and implement that's going to allow us to go into this next high part at a higher performance, at higher efficiency?
Yeah.
And the systems is I mean, that's all businesses should operate systematically to help everyone be successful.
Yeah, most don't.
Most don't.
Yeah.
And again, it's a really good time to step back and say, okay, what is it that I need to be doing better? And this, I'm not talking to business owners only.
Mm-hmm.
This is everyone.
Everybody.
Yeah. Everybody. And you know what? So when we had the HVAC business, I always encouraged the guys because when it was a slow period for us, that meant that we were in the middle of a season change.
Mm-hmm.
It was either getting ready to get really cold or really hot. Well, that's the best time to pull everything off the shelves of your truck, clean, reorganize, do inventory, and stock for the upcoming season.
Mm-hmm. Like, dude, I mean, we've even had guys in the shop building shelves, like for the shop, because we had like these wooden shelves that we stored a bunch of stuff on. One of them collapsed, and it's like, fuck that, everything's going to steel. So, you know, it's stupid shit like that. But I mean, we're also, you know, doing maintenance on equipment. We're at the saw shack, you know, making you have to spend the money on your business and not just buying equipment. Like you have all your maintenance, and as far as your maintenance is concerned, you need to spend time on maintenance on your people too, sharpening those skills. And like we're so adverse within the market that the problem that we run into a lot is that we won't use a process for like 6 months and then throw somebody out to go do it, and they're like, you know, kind of fall on their face a little bit,
right?
And it's you know, if we can spend any time training, and we've been really fortunate that Nick is really up people's asses about it. He's like, why the fuck aren't you in here doing this? Like, why aren't you staying late after? Like, you sit here and you drink beer after work. Why aren't you welding?
Right.
You know, and like Christian takes really well to that. Like Nick gets up Christian's ass, and then Christian's fucking busting out his test plates, and he's, you know,
so there's a term for that type of person. It's called a catalyst. You could be so lucky to have a catalyst on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are the people that get things done and get other people to get things done.
Yeah.
There was a book I read several years ago called The Catalyst Leader. It was a good book, but it explained really how the catalyst is a separator from everyone else, even from a leader, right?
Yeah.
A leader and a catalyst leader. So, you know, Nick is a catalyst.
Mm-hmm. Well, because Nick brought it up to the rest of the crew. He's like, do you think I get treated differently than the rest of you guys around the shop? And they all said yes. It's like, well, we do treat him differently because he does something different here. You know, I didn't have any terminology for it, but the fact that he is the catalyst, it's like we let some shit slide with Nick because he's doing Nick, you know, and it's like, yes, we get it. Our standards are what they are. But Nick, every time he's here, he's a fucking 110% in it, you know? So like,
yeah,
we look at him differently, you know? Like this whole equality shit, it's a fucking sham anyway.
I really appreciate that point because you can't treat everybody on the team the same because everybody's not the same.
Yeah.
They should have the same opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
there's a difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, doors fucking open. Do whatever the fuck you want.
That's why everyone doesn't make the same amount of money in a company,
right?
You know, I understand there's union structure and maybe, you know, corporate or organizational structure. I get parts of that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it should be a minimum, right, and not a maximum,
right?
But that's why in most companies, everybody doesn't make the same because everybody's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's common practice and a really poor mistake to make that, well, we work the same hours and we do the same type of work, we should make the same. Well, you're only looking at one facet of that equation.
Right.
And
that's hours on the clock.
That's hours on the clock. That's it. So again, when you separate from that and you start looking at behavior and performance, well, that changes the entire formula.
Fuck yeah. And especially if that's what you preach within your organization.
Right.
You're like, hey, this is what matters to us. And you got people that step up to the plate and knock it out of the park. It's like, hey, dude, here's a couple extra bucks an hour or,
right.
You know, something.
Because what are they adding?
Value.
Yeah. Brilliant. Who said that? So
bald guy with a beard.
Yeah, ruggedly handsome.
Is that what you're going with?
Shut up. I'm self-promoting.
You look like a penis with a beard.
Wow. Wow. I went from a thumb to a dick.
Thumb to a dick.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's an upgrade or not.
I got to take it out on you after your brother put it down on me during our coaching session all day today. He was on one today.
He was.
It was fucking hilarious, though.
his segue into that comment, fucking gold.
Oh, dude. Like, Matt, just sit down. Just stop talking.
I love it.
You're going to give me a fucking aneurysm.
Oh, man, it's so great. So your point in kind of our introduction here was we're going to talk about quality control.
Mm-hmm. And I as we segue into it, because I was thinking about the whole write up here. I was like, I don't think people understand how big of a staple QC is in leadership. Like how much this means to your leadership capabilities, to your ability to develop metrics and all this other shit. Like, this isn't just like a business standpoint. This is a fucking leadership standpoint, like
elaborate.
So like, this is how you know where people stand within your organization. This is how you stop stupid shit from happening to where you don't have to reprimand people and you don't have to get up their ass about shit when they can fix their problems before you don't even know about 90% of them, I mean, of course, if the time frames are going over, all that kind of shit matters. But for you to be able to hold people accountable with tangible shit, this isn't remember when you did this a couple weeks ago? It's like, no, it's right here, right now. This is what the fucking problem is. Why does this look like this? Like, do you know how many conversations you get to negate because of that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is like it's a behavioral tactic almost. This QC is like, and the fucked up part is we've had zero QC program the whole time. It was real easy when it was Matt and I, because everything was perfect.
And here's why I'm laughing is you've had no QC system or program this whole time, but it has been discussed, right? The conversation has come up, and it's one of the fascinating things that I find about what I get to do, because I'm always at a 30,000 foot view. Mm-hmm. And when I have conversations, not with just you and Matt, with everyone.
We're the only ones that matter.
I've learned that people, as long as it does come up in conversation and you are identifying the problem and working to solve it, at some point, everybody, drinks water at their own time. You can lead a horse to water. Everybody will drink it at their own pace. Mm-hmm. And the concept of quality control is really kind of aligned with you guys at the shop recently.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we hit that threshold,
right,
of the amount of people that are being led, and what our standards are high as fuck. So,
but the result was rework.
Yeah, and it was we were hemorrhaging because of it. I mean, the amount of money we spent just at powder coat to re-powder coat things after we fucked them up and they were an inch short or an inch long or whatever the fucking cause was staggering, and that's not including material, labor, all the fun shit that comes along with it. But Matt and I were just like, dude, like, who's checking this shit? And it's like, well, they should be. Well, but the person that built it fucked it up for a reason, like right. either they didn't understand the plans, or they're going to have confirmation bias. They're going to look at their shit and they're going to go back through and measure it and be like, oh yeah, no, that's what I meant to do.
Yeah.
You need outside eyes on fucking projects.
Right. I think it's also important to understand that this is one of those forevers, right? You can't explain someone the expectation of quality and never address it again.
Right. Or have a way to check that.
Right.
I mean, because like I said, our standards are high, but who's double checking those standards? By the time we get the finished product back and it's like, oh, it didn't fit. It's
right.
Like,
so now here's the question, okay, that I want to ask, kind of the question behind the question to kind of preface all of that is, how do you explain quality and expectation to someone. So how are you able to bring someone into a company and say, this is our standard? What does that mean? Yeah. Right. So what are those metrics? And this is part of our conversation tonight. That's going to lead up into, because we're going to give people a really good formula on how to create this.
Right.
But I think it's a question a lot of people don't ask themselves, because they in their mind understand what the expectation is. I think Matt's a great example. Matt knows what his expectation is, but how are you able to communicate that in a way that people comprehend it,
right,
and can apply themselves in a way that generates that result?
Well, and I've watched this evolve with Matt, and because I'm not really that hands-on with the crew that much anymore. I'm mostly administrative, but like originally when people would come into the organization and be like, your tolerance is a 16th of an inch. That was it.
Exactly. That was the definition of standard.
Definition of the standard. But then, after now that we have 6 people in that shop, that's not including us and the administrative side of it. But it's like, now you're here 10 minutes early. If you're not here 10 minutes early, you're fucking going home. Now it's, you have regimented lunch breaks, because the lunch break thing got out of fucking control, and there's people like, oh, I didn't take a lunch, and you see them walking around they're like in the break room heating up a burrito, and then you're like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? I thought you didn't take a lunch. No, I'm just gonna, a little snack. And it's like, by the time they get done fucking around in there, it's been 30 minutes. It's like, you took a lunch, motherfucker. Like, so, and that's one of those standards that you have to, because if you leave it up to people to decide what that looks like, trust me, you're going to get fucked on it every goddamn time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, this is so good. So I think a good beginning step is answer the question, how are you communicating the standard and the expectation? That's something that everyone automatically needs to spend more time on.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of that comes from, like you said, that micromanagement in the first couple of weeks that they're there. But I think you also need to have something kind of written out as far as here's what is expected of you at a baseline.
Right.
This isn't excellence. This isn't above and beyond. This is just, these are the non-negotiables across the board. And that's what your standards are, right? Those are the non-negotiables. And I think that none of us really have a clear, there's probably some corporate entities that, they go through it and do all that shit. But as a small business owner, where you have anywhere from 2 to 6 to 10 to 12 employees, you don't, nobody really knows what when are they crossing the line, Like there's that shit that's like industry standard, where it's like, well, you don't fucking leave a pinhole in a weld, which honestly, that's not an industry standard after going to that 2 Chicks up in Reno. Good God, that place is fucking horrendous.
It's so bad.
Good God.
I don't know what that building was originally, but it's still bad.
It's a fucking polished turd at this point. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have something there for them to understand and be able to check with them to be like, hey, this is what bare minimum looks like. This is the standard, because if you really think about it, the standard is that's bare minimum to stay here.
I agree.
So, and if they can't comprehend that, also, you have to find ways to comprehend. Like if you got a greenhorn that comes in and you're like, your tolerance is a 16th of an inch. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like nothing can be out of plumb, square, or level more than a 16th of an inch. Well, that doesn't seem reasonable. Well, we're not reasonable people. So
yeah. Back to the onboarding process, holding people accountable through that process to that standard is part of that introduction to that quality and that expectation. And, that onboarding and that micromanagement stage of the onboarding process, which is an intro to going from micromanagement to micro delegation, where you're developing trust, they're developing trust with you, and you're creating that alignment with what is expected, what is the quality. And so, through that onboarding process, it's very necessary to set the expectation of the expectation. And what I mean by that is you have to tell people, I'm going to pick apart every single thing that you do. You need to understand that, because I need you to not only understand the expectation, but to be able to adjust your behavior to meet it. And that micromanagement process is really about that. It's not just about understanding the result of the work, it's how they got there and the behaviors in which they chose to apply to that result.
Right.
Organization, communication, planning, tooling, skill set, all of that combined gives the result. Does the result meet the quality? Well, if the result doesn't meet the quality expectation, the result isn't the problem. It was everything that was implemented to create the result.
In between, yeah.
And so really understanding that, and then being able to again articulate, what that standard is. Now, this is the exciting part for me, because this is where we get into the implementation process of all of this that we've thrown out here so far. And it's something that I use in every coaching that I do, every client that I work with hears these 5 words at some point in time, because the conversation that I had with you and Matt a couple of weeks ago, I am privileged to have that conversation with everyone, because they're like, we're doing rework. The quality is not there. They don't understand the expectation.
What contractor isn't dealing with that?
And then it becomes in a lack of accountability, because if I do something you told me to do and then it's wrong, I'm going to say, well, I did it how you told me to do it, which is not the most mature response.
Well, yeah, and it's passing off the liability to somebody else, right? But I mean, I think also before we jump into that part, I think people need to understand that you're never going to get rid of rework in its entirety. This isn't some fucking magical formula that's going to fix all the shit. I mean, we're still humans, still going to make errors, but at least we can mitigate the amount that exists. Because I mean, we were talking about it, the powder coating numbers, and it's like, once you see that bill, and we were up to like $5,000 in less than 2 weeks at the powder coaters, and yeah, granted, some of that was active work and some of it was rework, but you start thumbing through those fucking invoices, and you're like, what the actual fuck? It's 2 weeks. And you got $2,000 worth of rework and just powder coat. And you're like, do you know what that equates to in material and labor and all that other shit? Like, that's the least expensive part of it. And it's like, holy fuck. Okay. And it's, we got to put it on ourselves. Well, we didn't equip them with some sort of a system to mitigate this. And it's like, it's easy to go out and motherfuck them and like, why aren't you doing better? And this and that. And it's like, why aren't we doing better? We're not upholding the standard ourselves. We're not double checking to make sure that the standard is there. So how do we fix that?
So the first part is you need to have a systematic way to transfer information. So what does the transfer of information look like? When you hand off a project or a task, doesn't matter how big or small, you need to have a systematic way to transfer that information to the individual or individuals performing the work.
Well, because we even had that during our coaching today. It went from, when is something my deal, when is something Matt's deal, and when is something Garrett's deal, and when is something Nick's deal. Like, to have clear, concise delegation points, to have a moment when it's like, my job is done now. It is now your job until it is their job.
Watching you and Matt today have that aha moment of recognizing that delegation point today was really cool.
Yeah.
Because you both agreed that was the correct place.
Right. That was the mending of both of our thought processes. It was like, yeah, that's when it should be done. Yeah. But I mean, like, right. Matt and I just did because usually we'll do a pre-job meeting with just the whole crew, and it's kind of a just quick run through. But like, Matt and I sat down, we were about to do a big tilt up over by our shop, and it was like, Matt and I sat down with the plans, and it was like, okay, we got intimate with the plans, and we were like, I've got everything flagged on the plan sets, so we're not even fucking with the steel detailing yet. It's just the plan set. So it's like, well, how does this work? How does this work? And we're, and I've got I've already been through this thing 15 fucking times. Right. So I know exactly where I need to go to find everything. But instead of just dropping a plan set off on his plate and being like, here, this job's yours now, and then he's got to go study those plans, why don't I just spend 20, 30 minutes and run down that whole thing with him? Be like, this is as much information as I extracted out of it. You're going to need a little more, but that's where the steel detailing comes in. That's going to fucking fill in the voids of what I haven't explained yet. So it was like that was one of those aha moments too, of like, this has to happen every fucking project that we do now.
Yep. And that's that transfer of information, right? And finding a way that something that can be repetitive, can be accessible, can be easy, right? All of the requirements for an effective system. So developing that transfer of information. Now, to give everyone some insight of how to create that system, whoever is doing the work, go to them and ask them, what information do you need from me to be able to do your job effectively? So when I hand you a project or I give you a task, what information do you need from me? Ask them. Don't try to create that shit on your own. Ask them, all right, write down. I want you to create a bullet point list of the information that you need or think that you need from me if I were to give you information to do a job. That's the first thing that you've got to create, is that a way to transfer and access information.
Well, and I think you have to understand that answer is going to change between pretty much everybody in your shop. That everybody needs a little bit different information. But if you ask that question to everybody, you can develop some sort of shit that encompasses all of it.
Exactly.
Because it's all pretty close, right?
It is pretty close.
Yeah.
But the exception to the rule isn't the rule. Obviously, you're going to have to approach projects that are going to be situational, and you're going to need to approach it a little differently. But most of the time, you can, again, systematically transfer that information. So ask your team. The other thing that that's going to do is generate buy-in for that system, because they're helping you develop it.
Right.
They're informing you as to what information they need to do their job successfully. So have that conversation with them. Give them 3 to 5 days, whatever you think is sufficient for them to come back and say, all right, this is the information that I think I need. And in that time, you're going to develop what you think is necessary, a list or the information that you think they need. And then you marry the two together. You have a conversation. You weed out the shit that you don't need, and you focus on the things that you do need. You develop that system together. Then you start working on implementation and how it aligns with the expectation. Okay, so to be able to meet the quality standard, to understand the time constraints that we have, to understand whether it's material, client, doesn't matter, that information is going to be in there, and you hand that off to them. This is the mistake that most people do, if they even have a system, is they hand off that project and they say, let me know when it's done.
Good on you, champ.
And that's the entirety of the conversation. And that's the entirety of the communication, right? So transfer of information is not the same as communication.
Yeah. Well, I think the fucked up part of that whole thing is that, like, you have like 1 or 2 people that you have worked with or are within your organization that you can do it that way with them. They're that good at their trade. They know what they're doing. And then you start getting spiteful when other people can't do that.
Right.
And it's like, dude, you went from a rock star to a groupie.
Or you make the mistake of imposing your own abilities onto people.
Oh, yeah. I've done that plenty.
Oh, have you?
I do that to Matt all the time. I'm like, Matt, why aren't you better?
But we think because we know how it's done, especially if it's coming from the people that designed it.
Right.
Right. Or, I know Matt draws up a lot of different projects.
Yeah. We gave him a bunch of crayons.
Stop eating the crayons.
Yeah. This one tastes like grape.
When he hands that off, he knows A to Z how it needs to be built, how it needs to be constructed.
Right.
So when you hand that project off and then you impose upon them your knowledge and ability without having that conversation, that's unfair, and you're setting them up for failure.
Yeah.
Because you're giving them an expectation that they don't understand.
Well, and I've also watched like his drawings evolve as time has gone on. Cause like there was stuff that, him and I would be working on and be like, hey, we need to build this. And like, I could take one look at it and go, okay, cool. I know what to build. But that Matt and I are like on same fucking wavelength type shit, So then to pass it off to like a greenhorn or, somebody out in the shop that hasn't spent 10, 12, 15 fucking years with us, looks a little different, And so that's where that disconnect comes from. You're like, why don't you understand this? Well, they don't. So fix your shit,
Exactly. Equip them with the information and with the communication that they need to successfully complete that.
Mm-hmm.
So when most people just hand off the project, and again, so to your point, that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to be able to hand off projects to your team. So how do you create that? And that's the kind of the root of the conversation tonight. So if I'm going to hand you a project, transfer of information, I'm going to say, here, take a look at this, evaluate it, create some questions if you have them. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to throw out 5 words that's going to change the entire way that you communicate and that your team performs. Walk me through your plan. Mm-hmm. And so if I hand you a project and I'm going to say, all right, Nate, take a look at this, come back in 5 minutes, walk me through your plan.
Mm-hmm. Because you've talked about this for a long fucking time on this podcast.
Yeah.
I implemented it for the first time yesterday, and I was blown the fuck away by the dumbass answer I got. I was just like, "Oh my God, what the fuck?" Like, okay, hold on, let's reel this back in. Let's come back to step 1. This is fucking dumb. Like, and it's not. It's a lack of experience, you know, and so. But once you let them run loose on it, you know, you're like, okay, yeah, develop this fucking plan, and then they develop it, and then you're like, okay, well, this is why you're wrong, and it's not like a condescending thing. It's like, this is why this isn't going to work. This is why we're wasting some X amount of man hours. This is why we're losing some sort of efficiency, because they're not looking at it from the perspective of efficiency and man hours and all that kind of shit. They're looking at it as, what's the easiest way to do this? And it's like, no. The easiest way to do it is probably going to cost you fucking money. Right? Like, we need to keep everybody moving simultaneously. Everybody needs to have a task. And it's like, well, you know, fucking, we can do it this way. And it's like, that's not that hard. It's like, okay, well, easy doesn't pay the bills.
Right? That's right. And I laugh when you told me the story in the coaching today, because I know that the first time that you asked that question, it's clunky.
Well, and you realize the disconnect you have from their thought process, you know, and you're like, oh shit.
You're like, oh, that's not where I didn't even, that wasn't even an option for me. I didn't even think that was a real option.
Like, how the fuck could you think that way?
Right. So ask, make that statement, walk me through your plan. And then when you evaluate their plan, your responsibility is to
not be a dick about it. I'm guilty that I might have been a little bit of a dick about it. And then I got done with it. And I'm like, ooh,
well, and that's why, when we were talking earlier today, I said, okay, part of this whole process, you also have to learn how to implement it.
Yep.
And because your example that you give me today is, you said, all right, walk me through your plan. They did. And you immediately became the easy button problem solver.
Yeah.
And you just told them how to do it.
Right.
Which eliminates their plan, which really means it eliminates their buy-in.
Yep.
Now they're back to just doing what you told them to do.
Mm-hmm. God, like, all this shit is so, like, like, it makes so much sense, but when you go to implement it, you're like,
it's
like,
crazy.
What the fuck? Like,
it's crazy.
Come here, stupid. Let me show you.
It's way easier to talk about than it is to do
implement.
it.
Yeah.
Because you're doing it in the moment, so everything is pulling at you. Everything is distracting you. And somebody's going to say, I don't have 10 minutes to spare to walk through it. Well,
you got a couple hours to rebuild the fucking thing?
Exactly. The other part, kind of quick sidebar, is if you have a multifaceted team, delegate this task to your leaders. Mm-hmm. Or if you have a 2 or 3 person team that's doing this job, assign a team leader and then, work this through with them.
Well, and I think people need to, like, that. I think that's huge. That you need to have a shot caller. Mm-hmm. If you have multiple people working on it, don't just let people loose on shit. You got to put somebody in charge of that fucking thing.
That's right.
Because otherwise, the clash that's going to happen, and you want to see fucking team members start duking it out over shit, trying to figure out who's got the better idea, because nobody was put in charge of the fucking thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with seniority. It's who's best equipped to complete the task. Mm-hmm. So when they come back in a few minutes, your responsibility is to identify the holes in their plan. Mm-hmm. And when I say walk me through your plan, in your case in the welding fabrication industry, that may be a cut list.
Mm-hmm.
That may be, where are you going to stage material?
That's so dumb.
It may be, okay, what piece of the project are you going to start on first?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have 2 or more people, all right, who are you going to delegate to do what? Walk through that entire plan with him. It's not going to be a perfect plan. Now, to identify holes, and this is what we were joking about, because it's easy to go, well, that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
To continue to generate buy-in, continue to encourage thinking, and develop foresight in people, you want to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So
I did not do that.
Right, I know. So if there's something that you don't agree with or understand about a piece of the plan, just kind of emphasize that part. Nate, all right, I don't understand this part of the plan. Help me understand why this is the process. And then they can dissect it. And what's brilliant about that is most of the time people will realize the problem when they start saying it out loud.
Yeah. It's like, wait, hold on.
That's actually not going to work.
That's not what I meant to say. I meant to say we were going to do this.
So your objective is to create conversation, create communication in a way that gets people to understand their own plan.
To stimulate.
Yes. So identify the holes, and then you say, okay, that sounds good. Making sure, reemphasizing the constraints, the time constraints, material, whatever that is, the expectations. All right, so you can get this done in 30 man hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, and I think honestly, for accountability, and now that we're sitting here talking about it, I almost feel like once you guys do agree on a plan, you should almost write that out, or have them write it out and be like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. Make sure you write that out, put it in the file. So that way, if somebody else does have to jump in, somebody gets pulled off to go do something in the field, we got to throw somebody in the mix here. That person knows exactly what hole they're filling, and they know what their delegated responsibility is.
So to that point, this is something that we've worked to develop with my other clients that's becoming very popular, especially as you're introducing this system, right? Is a 2-part POA. I'm going to have you walk me through your plan in the morning, and then at lunch, we're going to evaluate, and I'm going to have you walk me through your plan for the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to kind of break that down into bite-sized pieces. So instead of a 3-day project, we're going to chop it all the way down to a 4-hour time block.
Mm-hmm.
All right, walk me through your plan. What are you going to have done by lunch? And then we start there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you or the shot caller or the team leader, whoever, at lunch says, okay, let's reevaluate. Where are we at? What's our second part POA for this?
What's working, what's not?
Exactly. And I have found that works because it's easier to manage when you break it down into small pieces like that. Also, it's difficult for a lot of people to give you a 3-day plan.
Yeah, right.
So we understand what the end result is and the goal and the expectation. So let's bring that all the way back to today. What do we need to have done today?
Mm-hmm.
And, the HVAC industry or the construction industry, okay, what are you going to have tore out and put back in? What are you going to have measured and built? Regardless of what it is, break that down into manageable pieces and turn that into, again, a 2-part POA.
Mm-hmm.
You'll also find that it's easier to manage, but it's also easier for the team to comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, what you're wanting to create here is foresight. You want your team to be able to look at a project and see it through.
And think about it.
Yes. And think about how that process is going to be. Who's going to be responsible for what? And even if you're a single person, it's like, all right, where do I need to start on this? What's the first things that I need to do? And you're going to identify what works and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, is kind of back to your point. It's like, you're going to have rework. This isn't perfection. It's not about eliminating rework. It's about mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you don't have this? People approach a project reactively the entire way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that people get in such a hurry, our deadline schedules. I mean, schedules and contracting mean fucking nothing. So you're just trying to hammer everything out as quickly as possible. And you're like, well, I can't spend half an hour letting these guys figure this out. And it's like, well, you're going to spend 2 to 3 hours once they fuck it up to fix it. So, I mean,
yeah,
to pick your fucking poison here. And so for one, you're probably coming in with less hours wasted. And then you also have happier clients.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because your people, like when people fuck shit up, like it wears on them, you know, when you're like, hey, you fucked this up and you cost us powder coat and this and that.
Right.
And it like, it'll send people spiraling, you know, because they take pride in what they do.
That's right. That's right.
So like you have to see the benefit in it. And I'm saying, just try it once, just once. I did it once and I'm like, oh my God, that's SLP now, you know?
Yeah. So. And I was, I had another client here recently. We went through this whole process and explaining walk me through your plan. And it was, he sent me an email a few days later and was like, this changed everything. Mm-hmm. Because you do have something to hold them accountable to now. So if and when, all right, something doesn't go correctly, instead of being accusatory, I'm going to ask you and say, all right, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Why did this happen? Where was the breakdown, the malfunction, the mistake, the misunderstanding? Because it's either going to be systematic or behavioral.
Mm-hmm.
And if you veered away from the plan that you agreed to, I need to understand why.
Mm-hmm.
Not that things aren't going to change, but did the course correction still align with the expectation and the result?
Mm-hmm.
If the result's not what it's supposed to be, then that answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a shortcut? Were you trying to improvise in a way that it didn't need to be?
Mm-hmm.
Why was the decision made to create this result? If they veered away from their plan, you have something to hold them accountable to.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then did their plan work? And if it didn't work, we're probably going to do something similar to this down the road. So let's figure out what the fucking hole was.
So by the way, that's a much better conversation to have than the accountability conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the plan itself didn't work, then you have an opportunity to evaluate.
Mm-hmm.
Experience isn't the best teacher. Evaluated experience is.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the plan didn't work. All right, let's identify why the plan didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And now we get to start creating new ways, new processes, new thought methods of creating something that will work.
Mm-hmm.
That's a much healthier conversation. That's a creative conversation. And it's not meant to be negative. It may have had a negative result because something didn't work. Welcome to being alive.
Mm-hmm.
But the conversation's a lot healthier because now you guys get to collaborate.
Mm-hmm. And I can't remember who it was that said it. He said, I've never failed. I've just found 1,000 ways it didn't work. Like this is a constant,
exactly.
You know? And especially, and what worked today, once you boost your team from 6 to 8 people, a lot of that shit might not work, right? And
evolution of the system.
The systems have to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you guys get new tooling, you get new equipment, you get new people in the mix that aren't as capable or are capable in different areas that'd be more suited to do certain things. You have to constantly be looking at all this, and it's fucking exhausting, but that's your goddamn job as a business owner, right?
Yeah.
And so there's like, well, that seems like a lot of work. And it's like, does just fucking up every project that you send out of here, does that not seem like a lot of work?
I want to clarify and emphasize your point. If you're not willing to invest in yourself, grow, develop, and invest in your people, work to create the best experience for your client, work to develop ways for your business to operate systematically, efficiently, and effectively, and equip yourself and your team with the tools that everyone needs to be successful. And if you're not willing to go out into the market every single fucking day to make a difference and move the needle, go to work for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Get the fuck out of the game.
Yep.
Close up, sell your shit, and go back to work for somebody else. Because I think too many people misunderstand the necessity of growing and developing and the type of person that it takes to have a successful business. The other point is you have to understand it takes years upon years upon years to create a successful, sustainable company. And even then, there's no guarantees.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes 10, 15, 20 years to develop a successfully operating, efficient company.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not in it for the long haul, if you're not willing to invest yourself and not sacrifice, okay, this was a conversation you and I were having before we hit the record. I'm not talking about sacrificing yourself. And honestly, if you understand the value of what we're talking about in developing people and systems and creating efficient ways for your business to operate, you don't have to sacrifice yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can invest yourself in becoming better and learning how to sell and learning how to lead and learning how to just be a better fucking person. As a side rant there, but I want people to understand, like, that's what it takes. You can't almost this shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
you're either all in or you're all out.
And that's why I said it's an investment. And I
think there's too many people that look at business like that's what success is. Is that owning your own business success?
Oh God.
And it's fucking not. They know, like, the amount of people I know that run businesses that I'm just like,
that you mean that own jobs?
Yeah. And they're just running themselves into the fucking ground. And it's like, you're not happy. And there is no rainbow at the end of this. You know, for you, there isn't, you know, like you're not investing in other people.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I see a lot of owner operators, you know, and that fucking works out fine for a lot of people, you know, and it, like, they do really well for themselves and they love the fuck out of what they're doing,
mm-hmm.
but they have to lead themselves that whole way through, you know? And so I wish more people understood that owning a business isn't success.
Right.
That's not success. They're like, well, no, I get to say that I own my own business. I'm like, yeah, but you fucking suck at what you do.
Cool.
You don't make any money.
Yeah.
Everybody fucking hates you.
Yeah.
Like,
you're damaging the market. You're damaging the clients.
Yeah.
And you're far better off wearing the uniform of somebody else's brand.
Mm-hmm. And you can be a fucking rock star at that.
Completely agree.
Like, you don't have to be out in front.
No, and it's, yeah, man, and that's probably a whole nother podcast.
Whole other episode.
You know, I really think it is, and honestly, there's as I'm saying that, I think that'd be a good interview conversation for some people, that I know. But back to the point, it's like you have to be willing to look at your business from a bird's eye view, from that 30,000 foot view, and look at the operational efficacy.
Yeah.
And look at how you're communicating with your team, and look at how you're equipping them, and look how you're transferring information. So, the whole process of walk me through your plan, it's got some prerequisites to it. Mm-hmm. And we talked about, you got to transfer information. You have to have that accessible. It's going to take patience, right? But
yeah, I mean, I'm like the golden example of that. I just flew off the handle right away. It's like, oh, okay, no, all of you are done.
Like, you're dumb.
Here's your plan. Here's your plan. Come here, little fucks.
I know, when you told me the story, I was like, well, that was almost right. You started out really good.
Yeah. And I said the words.
You said the
words.
And then you just wrecked it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay.
No, so.
But I mean, the realization I got from that was unreal. It was unreal because you have to understand that the priorities are completely different between what you think is priority and what they do. But at the end of the day, what your priorities are what really matters if you're out leading the ship, because you got to have money to do, like all the things have to work.
The military term is commander's intent.
Yeah. Yep.
And the people on your team have to understand what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part of the quality is a part of that. And, so I want to kind of conclude this conversation tonight with what you guys developed in the quality control system. Mm-hmm. So you introduced the walk me through your plan process. You got to experience it once. You started it yesterday, but also at the same time, you introduce another system on how to be able to manage the quality control correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we held a meeting on Monday, and it was like, we wanted to hear everybody's opinion on it. And Matt's got a good point that it's better to just put the question out there and give them a week to chew on it, and kind of have them look at the operation a little differently before they start spouting off some sort of idea. But we were like, hey, you guys, we're hemorrhaging on rework. Because we won't let anything leave that's fucked up. We're going to do it right. And according to our standards, you guys, like, things are not going out right. So how do we mitigate this? How do we develop some sort of a QC system that everybody can be involved in? Because you can't, unfortunately, in our shop, you can't delegate that to one person. There's a revolving door of people that are in the field, in the shop. And so what we kind of developed was, anytime any project gets pulled out of the shop, you go get somebody else that QCs that project for you. And you guys all better be fucking comfortable enough with each other to be like, okay, be like, hey, dude, this is out by a fucking quarter inch. Because, I mean, Matt's going to make you cut it apart regardless.
Yeah.
Let's just hope to God it hasn't been fucking powder coated yet. But then, like, we had that conversation on Monday. And today they were working on these huge moment frames.
They're enormous.
W18 by 143, and they're 45 feet long. They're like almost 7,000 pound beams. And they start pulling the beams out. I'm like, who QC'd that? And then the guy working on the project was like, oh, I did. I'm like, we literally talked about this on Monday. He's like, oh, well, I mean, I pulled tape, and it's like, I'm like, no, somebody else go QC that fucking thing. But you got to realize, though, that implementation, if you're not up their ass about it, because to build that habit, especially with something as uncomfortable as your coworker fucking going through your shit and being like, is this right? Like, it's easy to create animosity there if you don't have a good culture to support it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that you have to be open. Again, you have to have that good culture. Otherwise, your ego is going to take a beating. So you guys kind of introduced these together, right? The walk me through your plan and then the QC monitoring. So you have to go get somebody else to say, all right, nope, you got to clean that splatter. Nope, that weld looks like shit. Nope, your fade is bad. Nope, this is out of measurement.
Yeah, you're an 1/8 inch off here.
Yep.
Because, I mean, especially with a lot of these custom homes, there's a lot of bolt up involved in it. And I mean, we only overbore our bolt holes by a 1/16.
Right.
So if that shit's not where it's supposed to be, some of these beams are fucking $6,000-$7,000. So, I mean, you fuck up on the hole placement on those things. Trust me, you're gonna have a bad day once Matt gets a hold of you.
And what I want people to understand is, once this becomes kind of habitual for the company, right? Once the expectation is clear and it's being met every day, this doesn't take very much time.
No, and because especially like with our beams, especially for custom homes, because we have so there's like a lot of stiffener plates, a lot of shear tabs, and a lot of studs. We're like, just worry about the stiffeners and the tabs and overall lengths. Don't worry about the stud placement. Like, we don't need to go ape shit with it.
Right.
Like, there's some stuff that it's like, we don't need to spend an hour QCing one beam.
That's my point.
Yeah.
This is meant to be efficient. It's meant to be mitigation, right? It's meant to mitigate rework. So if you're going to spend 5 to 15 minutes start of the day, start of a project, doing a walk me through your plan, and then you're going to spend 10 or 15 minutes at the end of the day doing QC control, which quality control, that doesn't make sense, but
way to go. A little redundant, Josh.
Trying to make a point here. that time invested is going to save you
thousands of dollars. I can show you the receipts.
Yeah, I believe it. And I can't imagine the powder coat guys.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
Again.
I'm like, hey, dude, I need this on a rush. He's like, yeah, you said that last time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to go get to it for a few days.
Yeah.
You start calling in those
standard practice for you guys now.
Yeah. And you look like shit,
Right.
Like, and it's, dude, you're dealing with other tradesmen, and when your shit keeps coming back, they don't look at it as, oh, you guys' standards are too high. They look at it as like, damn, you guys can't fucking do their job.
Exactly.
And it's a culmination of the two. Our standards aren't too high. Standards are where they should be. but we look bad when we do that, you know? I mean, like the one time that I fucking lost it on our crew, we were doing custom fence panels around a house up at Incline Village.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, these people spent $120,000 between their gate and their fencing. Like, we powder coated, custom sloped to the weird terrain that was there. And the boys went up there with 13 panels. They came back with 12 panels because they were all built 3 inches too short. And I fucking lost it. Everybody got dragged in the office. I thought everybody was about to shit their fucking pants because I was up their ass about it. And I'm like, I don't yell, right? I mean, I talk shit, but I lost it. I'm like, do you have any idea what it looks like to that fucking client that's living in that fucking house, and you just showed up with 13 panels and you drove off with 12 because you fucked them up? Do you know what that looks like to that person that is spending this absorbent amount of money on this shit? And, you know, like, then they all start staring at the floor. It's like, you saw it sink in, you know,
and the reality of that is you didn't have a system in place to ensure their success.
Yep.
And to allow them to be successful.
Yeah. Well, then it took us another 2 fucking years to put some sort of system into place. So what does that say about our leadership skills, you know?
You guys need a better coach.
Yeah, I know. It's too much. There's too many facets to deal with. It
always is. And that's why I said earlier, people come to things in their own time.
And Matt and I also have I don't know if Matt knows he does, but he has pretty bad ADHD, and so do I. And so we like to hyper fixate on, like, especially through the coaching. There's like one thing we'll find, you know, we might talk about multiple things in the coaching, but there's one thing we pick out and we hyper fixate on it and nail it. Right. And then the rest of it's just like, just off in the fucking wind. So has it maybe taken us a little bit longer to pick up on a lot of this shit? You know, and there's things that we talk about that I understand it conceptually, and then we don't implement it right away, but we got bigger fish to fry at that point, you know, because there's a ton of information that comes through that coaching. You know, there's a lot, no matter how many notes you take and how much sense it makes, implementing it is completely fucking different.
That's right.
And so, like, once you get one area polished and you start working your way through another area, and then by the time you're like, okay, well, that was like the last one on the list, and it's been 6 months, you got to look back at that first fucking system, and you're like, oh my God, okay, well, that needs to be revamped.
Yeah, we've outgrown it.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of my coaching now has switched to once every 2 weeks or once a month, because of the implementation process, because of the time that it takes. And that was something that I learned. Going week to week to week to week consistently was
too much.
With small business,
it's
too much to implement, because as soon as we get out of the coaching session, real life is waiting for them.
The phone's ringing and emails are popping up. They're like, fuck.
So they go back to taking care of their business and taking care of their clients. And so by my clients helping me, a lot of them will say, okay, what's my homework? Like, what's the one thing I need to focus on or do or develop by the time we meet next? And, you know, if they're small, it might be 2 or 3 things. But I've also learned too, because if I don't get excited, they do, and they want to jump ahead a little bit. And I'm like, hey, let's make sure we've got this, you know, this in place. And that was a mistake that I made early on, just because of lack of knowledge, because of my own excitement, is we go week to week to week, and we would discuss something new every week. And it was a great momentum of energy, but not implementation.
Right. Because I mean, the implementation is the nitty gritty, the shit that it's not glamorous, you know, like, it's clunky. It's awkward.
It really is.
People are pissed off. They're like, well, why the fuck are we doing this?
And thank you for that, because a good indicator of system implementation is your culture. A good culture really eases this process. It really.
So you're saying work on that first.
That's what I'm saying.
Maybe being somebody good to work for might be a great step in the right direction.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Huh, what a fucking concept. Who would have thunk?
I know. You done? I'm done.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like almost an hour exactly.
Oh, thank God.
You're the one talking my ear off when we got here.
Okay.
I know. I'm just fucking with you. It's good to have you back in here.
Yeah,
always,
yeah.
man.
I'm excited for this in-person interview, and
me too. It's we got to narrow down the time, but that's coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and I've been doubling down back on the self-development shit, so I'm excited about the things I'm going to learn through what material I have provided to me, and see what that kind of stirs up conversation-wise, you know, and maybe start bringing some different aspects and some outsider information, and you know, like I got away from it for a little bit and went through some personal shit, and now I feel like plane's taking off again. So.
Well, if you listen to this last week's podcast, there's a good 5-step plan for you.
Right.
The 5 C's of personal growth.
Yeah.
The when this comes out, anybody that's interested in learning about the toolbox, go to the YouTube channel. We're putting one of the toolbox videos up on YouTube, accessible to everyone
for free.
And because I think it's important for people to see what it is,
to understand the value,
in it. And so we're going to put we have a toolbox video up on YouTube. Just go to the YouTube channels, The Tradesman Experience. This podcast will be on there, and some of the previous podcasts were at least audio of every podcast we do now is up on there. So go check that out. You can find Nate on Instagram at NateNewton87. I'm on Instagram at The Tradesman Experience. Website's thetradesmanexperience.com, and email is thetradesmanexperience@gmail.com. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Get out there, get shit done. Be proud to be a tradesman. See ya.